Good day. Welcome back to our second part for discussions involving still interest rates. Make sure to watch the first part of the series to be able to connect to our latter discussions. For this interest rates and bond prices, we'll be able to see the connection of the two. Well, for those who are able to have discussions in financial management, especially for bond valuation, for valuing bonds, and even for financial accounting and reporting with discussions like bonds payable, you know this, that if ever there is no quoted price or prices, there are no quoted prices in active market in which the fair values or current values of the bonds are simply multiplied as a percent of such quotations. Let's say the market value of bonds is at 101. So basically, the fair value of the bonds or the current price of the bonds would be whatever is the par or the nominal value or amount multiplied by 1.01 or 101%. Quotations, by the way, for bonds are expressed at not percentages. So our mindset would be that they are already expressed at percentages. All right. But for this one, in the absence of any quotations, that's the time that we are going to use the interest rates for our computations. So let's say we have a 1 year, $100 discount bond with a price of $98. And using our YTM, that's basically the discount of 2 divided by 98. So again, the discount, which is the implied interest over our price, that's 2%. Well, we can say this is an estimate because if this is actually the discussions of bonds to be strict, we have to interpolate the rate, and the rate might be different with that. That's just an approximation. Interpolation is discussed in other financial management and especially financial accounting and reporting subjects. Now consider the same 1 year, $100 discount bond with a price of $94. So that's 6 divided by 94 times 100, that's 6.4%, or that's 6.38 something percent. And with this, we can see that the higher bond prices are, then the lower the returns, considering, of course, the same par value or nominal value or amount of the bonds. If you say nominal amount or nominal value or par value, basically, that's the stated value in the contract of such bond. So example, $100 for each bond. Let's just say there is just one bond in this particular contract. All right. So we can say that if ever we have lower returns or lower interest rates, then the bond prices are going to be higher. And with that, the returns are basically the interest rates that we talk about. So if you are in the part of the investor, if we are going to invest prices that are higher of a certain bond, let's say $100 bond, that means to say that we expect lower returns from, again, lower interest rates, 2% with 98 versus 6.4% with $94 each respectively. And in other words, to summarize, there's an inverse relationship between our interest rates and bond prices. Inverse meaning when one increases, the other decreases. What's the difference between a bond price and an interest rate? So they're both relative prices. And we can say that the interest rate is price of a current dollar in terms of foregone future dollars. So we would like to know or estimate, because they're relative, which means that they're both estimates. That's what we would like to highlight. And going back for interest rate, it's a price of a current dollar in terms of foregone future dollars. Meaning to say, we would like to know the value of it in the current time, but it's based on the future dollars that are foregone. So additional amount to be paid in that case, or additional returns that we receive as investors. Bond price, on another hand, will be the price of a future dollar in terms of foregone current dollars, or we let go of our dollars to invest in certain bond, and bond price will be the price of that future dollar. But compare that with the interest rate we're in, we forgone dollars in the future, and then it is the price in the current time. All right, so that's the difference of the two items. Then another one, which is a good illustration. This is a graph or graphical illustration for interest rates in the US from 1984 to 2004 for a 1-year treasury bill, in which normally treasury bills are short-term financial instruments, so 1 year or less, but the interest rates are fluctuative in nature, and we can really see here somewhere or sometime close to January 1, 94, that in the first half it's at the lowest, but on the latter half, if we divide the graph, we have this here, the lowest point, close to January 1, 2004 for T-bills. So the learning point here is that for short-term purposes, normally the fluctuations would be more. If we say fluctuations, so the movements would be rapid for short-term financial instruments. And also here for the 1-year treasury rate. So that's the return as well. Let's check. So from 84 to 2004, 1984 rather, to 2004. Here, 1984 cut to 2004, and we expanded going back to January 1, 1959. So really we can see it's fluctuative. And let us continue. Forgive us if we are moving the slides so much because we have to go back and forth. These are the interest rates in the US with federal funds, so government funds in the form of treasury bills with different or varying years, 1 year, 5 year or years, and 10-year or years. So the mean or average, standard deviation, and the correlation with each. Anyway, this is mathematical. We'll not be discussing that. That's going to be a discussion in statistics. For interest rates in the US, we can see again that the movement is very dramatic and rapid, and it's moving from up and down or bottom. Red, by the way, is 1 year. Our 5 years would be yellow. Yellow green would be 10 years, and Fed funds would be could be turquoise blue. That's the color of the graph. All right, so we can see that they have, of course, different placements, but overall, if we look at our movement, we can see that there's a pattern. It's just that, again, they are of different rates. And then we can also realize that overall, it's going down. The trend is going down for the interest rates in the US, since our source is from US. And these are now the completed information. We can see, though, that for the long term, the interest rates would, normally speaking, in average terms, would be the highest, since if we just keep our monies for longer periods of time, then we can average the ups and downs to get the highest returns. And we can see that the federal funds, which are normally short term, would be the lowest. And also, of course, with shorter time, our returns would be fluctuating that much. Therefore, the standard deviation would be at the highest, while the longer the term, the standard deviation would be the lowest. And the correlation or the relationship of the respective returns with each other, well, would be the highest for 10 years. Okay, so these are the correlations as shown. All right. If we actually compare them, so 1 year treasury bills, we have one. So if they are, of course, correlated with each other in our horizontal on top and vertical, so we can see the one. This again statistical, so we can just skip this one. Now, interestingly, interest rates mean reverting or stationary, which means to say that the average or mean would be close to each other and they tend to be fixed or close to be fixed because they're still moving, but we can say that if we have higher terms, then they can become stationary or less volatile, as said on the second bulleted point. Long-term rates are less volatile or moving than short-term rates. And in terms of persistency or consistency or similarity or being stationary, long-term rates would show more of that. There's high degree of persistence for long-term versus short-term and highly correlated with one another. Long rates less correlated with shorter rates. So we can actually see that, right? So this is somehow misleading or confusing for this one here as to what we are comparing. But can we check? Okay, so for 1 year treasury bills, yes, we can see that they are more correlated. So it's really true here that long rates would be less correlated with shorter rates. And this is our interest rates and inflation, which is going to show the relationship of the two. We have here our interest rates first, so similar a while ago. And now we have our inflation being included. The highlighted, I would say this is what color could be blue. Let's just say this is blue for 1 year treasury bill. And we can say it's lavender for inflation. So with inflation in place, normally that would erode the value of the returns. So if there are higher inflation rates, then the returns would tend to be lower. And we're talking about the real interest rates or the real returns, right? And inflation rates are highly correlated with interest rates, so less so for longer term rates. For longer term rates, the fluctuations again would be lesser. And inflation rates would tend to have lower impacts for longer term rates than the short term rates. Okay, so that would be the end for the second part involving interest rates and those items that we have discussed, bond prices, and the curve that we've had or curves, including inflation. So stay tuned for our third part, which is the start characteristics of business cycles. Thank you very much for listening to this session. Make sure to stay tuned, of course, for the next video in the series, the third part, and God bless us all.